Hey, this is your host Chris, and back from vacation is my co-host Rob. Welcome to another episode of Crappy Reviews, a channel all about helping you shed some light on your favorite shows.
To keep up to date with what's coming up, be sure to follow us on social media, and if you enjoy what you hear, take a second to hit the like button so we and the algorithm, the ultimate wise one, know we're on the right track. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get at it.
Oh boy, this episode. I have not seen a lot of love for this episode on the interwebs, but I think the biggest grievance we came across was so many cliffhangers and not a lot of answers, which I can understand. And at the end of this episode, I was under the impression that it was a series finale opposed to a season finale, and I was both angry and deflated at the same time when I thought that. But I found out later that this looks like it's a season finale, which gives me a little more hope. Doesn't fix all the problems, but gives me a little bit more hope that this is going to go in the right direction.
Yeah, knowing it's a season finale, not a series finale, I am less upset. However, it was just very disjointed for me at the end, and I think that would be my biggest call out of what kind of bothered me about this episode as a whole.
Yeah, I think you mentioned before was the most disjointed part we saw was at the very end. After Emma got to the merry-go-round or the carousel and it kind of faded to black, and I think most of us all assumed that was the end, we got two additional scenes. We had a kindergarten scene and an Apollo scene. So, good segue here. Let's jump right into the kindergarten scene. What do we know about kindergarten or the kindergartens after watching that scene?
Yeah, we learned that it's not just William Wheeler that is kindergarten. It is a group of 10,000 people. From what we gather, seems like 10,000 men that are all acting as one entity under the name kindergarten.
Right. It kind of has an I Am Legion feel to it. And I'm assuming they're all men. We had talked about this and, with his disdain for women and how he talks about him in even the last episode when he screams down from the mountain. I'm assuming these are probably all men. And the weird scene that we saw on the monitor kind of gives us that impression. So after doing a little bit of research, because 10,000 comes up a few times in this show. If you guys didn't know, it comes up by Apollo 3 separate times before this. When he talks about the Aleister Crowley book that he finds when Emma's not there, he says, this is going to get me 10,000. To Kill a Mockingbird book, his estimated price is going to be around 10,000. And the check that he gives Kim was for 10,000.
What? This will sell for at least 10,000. That could get us $10,000.
What's it, about $10,000 for a birth?
And then we also get this 10,000 here. So 3 possible connections that I had found about 10,000. One, the 10,000 immortals in Persian history. And for anyone that's watched the 300 movie, they discuss the immortals and they show them soldiers as far as the eye can see. Interesting about the immortals was that they always wanted to keep their number at 10,000 at all times. Someone died, they would just immediately replenish it. 10,000 was a very specific number that they were trying to keep it at after every loss. Like that same kind of vibe comes from the kindergarten cult, that they're just everywhere and they're trying to influence and take over. That's kind of how I saw it.
And there's 2 other connections we found with 10,000 that are less about the historical piece, but almost a numerology side of things. One of which is in the Bible, they use the number 10,000 a lot of times to signify a group or a gathering of certain things that are just innumerable or countless. So in this case, if kindergarten is saying there's 10,000 of them, to give that impression that there's just so many that it's innumerable at that point. And that one obviously would apply very much so directly to that kindergarten cult. The other one in numerology is that the number 10,000 signifies your ability to create your own reality, which if you've been watching this show and you hear that right off the bat, I could see immediately how that ties into the themes of this show, such as Cal and the women creating their reality on the island. So that number 10,000 definitely is going to tie in to the call out there for the whole show.
It was most definitely on purpose, and it's funny that you had brought up the Bible using the number 10,000 to just signify this innumerable number, because it kind of ties back into most likely why the Persian army, the Immortals, used the number 10,000, because it signified this unmeasurable infinite number of soldiers, and it was just going to be a wave going through. So that most likely makes some sense there. And the create your own reality, I kind of look back and see Apollo trying to create his own reality and the life he wanted to have and the money that he was going to get back from these books, giving him the ability to buy the house, which he talked to Patrice about in Patrice's basement. I still think, Patrice is suspect. Go back and watch the Green Hair Harry video, but I still think he's as suspect as he was before the season finale. But they had he brings up that he was going to use it for all these things and to start this life with Emma and Brian, and it kind of went away. And it's interesting that that's what it means, because he would have tried to create his own reality and for his family. And speaking of the William Wheeler kindergarten cult that we saw, in my opinion, I think that last scene that we had of him was a flashback of what he was doing while taking pictures and hunting down Apollo and baby Brian. Do you think it's a flashback, or do you think it's a flash forward?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit offline. I think it's definitely a flashback. It wouldn't make sense for it to be a flash forward, because again, he took the face off. Why would he go back to that? He's not gonna want to revert to what he doesn't see as himself. And again, it's just, I think it's more of a, for us, informational scene more than anything, not necessarily in the chronological order of things. So I think it's good information, but I think it's definitely a flashback that now we know it's not just. I keep using the name William Wheeler because it's obvious to make him to point out who we're talking about here, but this one of the 10,000 of kindergarten that we know, to show what we're actually dealing with outside of just this one KG.
Yeah, I agree with you, because he didn't have any bruising on him, and he had gotten beat up pretty bad twice. One in the cage, and then it went away. And granted, he could have, just like when he changed into to his real him, to his real face, he wasn't all beat up anymore. But I agree with you. I think just based off the look and the haircut and seeing the William Wheeler face, that it was most likely pre episode 8 that we got that.
So now we know there's more than one kindergarten, but one thing we don't know for sure is what the sea monster is. So Chris, do you still think it's an Umibōzu or an Umibōzu or a Uibozo?
See, you said the same thing as I did. You almost gave it the bozo treatment. I don't really know if it's a Umibōzu or not anymore. Only because it went on land and started messing some stuff up, and fires were happening. And whether or not it was like a dragon blowing fire, and the eyeball at the end kind of gave me like a frog, amphibian, reptile vibe. And I'm like, maybe it's a dragon, but it was under the water, so that doesn't make any sense. I'm not completely ruling it out, because the restaurant name being Umibōzu, we see 2 times. It's a critical restaurant in the show. It seems very specific to have that. It would match up with the size and what's going on here. It could just be that, like we said before, although some of these mythical creatures are set in one lore, that doesn't mean that it's not true all around. It could just be, some people call it Bigfoot, some people call it Yeti, some people call it Sasquatch. It's the same creature in myth, just, different peoples gave it different names. So I'm not saying no to the Umibōzu, because I still think it lends a lot of credence with that restaurant. With that said, it was on land, something was spitting fire. It could be 2 different creatures entirely, but I'm not going to rule it out quite yet because of the restaurant name. What do you think?
Yeah, my answer is I don't think it's an Umibōzu. I think it's potentially similar to, and I think that could be where the possible name of the restaurant came from, that they knew it was going to be similar. I've started to refer to this as a Sudowoodo for all of you Pokemon fans out there, because it looks very tree-like. But so I think it's similar. I think it was on the right track from the get-go. The point you've made, you've brought up, and I think it's all extremely accurate. Of it's this large monster, it can swim there. But again, the Umibōzu does seem to live strictly in the water, and we see very plainly in this episode that it is on land. Cal says, "You idiot, the big one can swim." So it seems to be that same creature. So I think it has a lot of characteristics. So I think the Umibōzu train was the right kind of way to start going, but I just don't think it's that specifically.
All right.
So
Well,
it's Sudowoodo for that. That's where I'm going with.
we will see. I'm sure people will give their opinions on what they think it is, and maybe you guys did your own research and saw a characteristic that really screamed at a particular monster. If you did, put it in the comments so the rest of us can know, and we can jump down that rabbit hole with you. So another question I have after watching this episode: one, when did Cal become a rock climber? She just scaled the mountain on the side, no problem, climbed the whole way up. And I was expecting to see her use some sort of magic, and that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, is the magic real or is it not real? I think it is real because the eyeball and the tree throw, and that this crazy monster, whatever it might be, exists. That lends credence to the fact that this is a fantasy magical universe. With that said, the witches don't really seem to have any juice. She did the doll trick, and then we saw Emma with the glow, and she seemed surprised at Emma's glow. So I'm curious to know what you think. Are we dealing with magic? Is it all just an allegory for some social injustice, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, so honestly, I think the monsters and the magic are separate. So I think we have pretty definitive proof that the monster is real. We see the tree flying, we see the eyeball, we hear all the noises, but I don't think the magic is real. Specifically because, like you said, we haven't seen a good example of it being used other than the doll, which there's some gray area there, I think. And also, Cal delivers one line in particular that says, "The real magic is what we'll do to protect those we love." And I think that's a lot of what the show centers around at that point, at least for Emma's storyline. And I think that in itself felt like proof to me that the existence of what we are considering magic here, right? Like witches being able to cast a spell or do something mystical in that sense. And she also says along the lines of saying, are they witches? Are we witches? Or is that just what men called women who did what they believed to be impossible? So I think there were two very deliberate line deliveries there by Cal, who's, presented to us as almost like the head witch, that makes me believe that the magic itself isn't real.
That's interesting. And because I go back and look at, and believe me, I think even on episode 7's review, I had made the statement that at the end of that episode, after I came off my acid trip, that was episode 7, that I was unsure if the magic was real at all. But then again, I was pretty unsure of a lot of things after watching that and getting my brain straightened back out, that, everything just seemed to be an allegory for something else. But then I noticed, I remembered, one, we got the eyeball at the end. We got the tree throw. We have William doing a wardrobe change and like hair change, the whole thing in that cage. He couldn't have done that without some sort of glamour magic. And I get the doll. I don't know if her blue eyes and all the rest of the stuff with Emma's real, but it very well could be. So with all that, I kind of said, all right, I think the magic is real. I think it's just we're expecting a little more Harry Potter and we're just not getting that. This is a more realistic adult version of what a fairy tale is going to be and a little less whimsy and fantasy. And I think that's probably where this lies.
Let me phrase it this way. I think I can sum it up very easily. I think the mystical exists. I think the perceived notion that we have of magic where people are able to control it, I think that's the piece that I'm not sure exists. That the monsters, like you said, the glamour magic with KG, and then also with Emma, I think my thought is that she's going through maybe some kind of portal. So I think that could be what that glow is from as well. So, and it's not necessarily that anyone's controlling it, but it's just we're seeing that mystical existence.
Makes sense. So, portals. We think the carousel is a portal, an entryway to the land of the Fae. She had reached her destination. Something weird is there, and most likely she had gone through whatever this portal is. I did tons of research on carousels, and I found nothing of note to tell anyone here. That's the missing link. That's the thing. So I will keep looking. It could just be imagery. But to Rob's point offline, the author's using some poetry that exists in real life. These are based on some poems, but the book itself isn't real. So we don't have anything to really like fall back on and go with. Speaking of books that are real, though, when we go back to the scene on the island and we see that our girl Greta, is the most dead, just as
Greta
dead as dead
is
gets.
very deada. Yes.
Wow, the most. Wow,
This is what you guys were missing.
I'm definitely leaving that part in.
Welcome back, Rob. This is what you guys
Greta
were missing.
is very deada. Right next to dead Greta, on the bottom left of the screen, there's a book there, and it's the Bridge to Terabithia, which is a fantasy book, and it deals with these two young kids. They're a little bit of oddballs. They're not the cool kids in school, and they go into the woods and they create this fantasy world with ogres and trolls and kings and queens and all this kind of stuff. Similar to this book. It's a fairy tale like book. And at the end of it, the younger girl she dies, and you find out that, the kid takes his sister over there and they create the world themselves. But the point is, the end of the book tells us that none of that was real. It was all in their imagination. The girl really did die. And I'm curious to know what you all think is the meaning of that book. Have you read it? Have you watched the movie? Have you done both? How do you think that the Bridge to Terabithia plays out? Because it was left in a pretty open position. You can tell what it is if you know the book. I'm wondering what you guys think the author was pulling or putting in there by showing us that book.
I'll just
go ahead.
let me just add to that really quick. And I think something you said offline that's really important to this is it's something we see and we can make out as a very plain clue if you find it there. And we've discussed too how they've done a very deliberate part in this show of showing us certain information and not showing us other clues that are going to be shown at other points later in the show. So everything's very deliberate. So it's, for there to be a book there with a cover that you can make out and you can see that it's the Bridge to Terabithia, there's something there. It's not, it might not be the entire giveaway or anything like that, but there's something to it. So that's why we want to know what your thoughts are on this, because I think whatever it is, there's something coming from that in the future of this show.
Just another piece to the puzzle that might lead us down kind of where we want to go. But back to portals. So we're assuming the carousel is a portal. It would make the most sense. Two other portals that I think might be real is Nassau Knolls, which is the cemetery that baby Brian is supposedly buried at. It's a real cemetery in New York. It's got a very nice tower, and it has stained glass windows and all kinds of stuff inside of it you can go inside of and check out. It's real, and it, to me, kind of looks like the tower that Cal had in her room that was for the puppet show, the Rapunzel Tower that we saw. And it's brought up by Lillian in a few episodes back, but it's referenced again in the intro of episode 8. And Kim, Emma's sister, also tells Brian to go check out the grave. It's been told by two different people to go check it out, and he hasn't gone there yet because he doesn't really want to. But I think that it's probably a place of significance and maybe some sort of portal itself, as well as a callback to the book that Wheels once, Chronicles of Peru by Pedro de Cieza de Leon. I had mentioned this in that episode, that there is these ruins there that resemble the ruins that Emma's gone through in both Brazil and on North Brother Island. And after doing a little more research on it, it looks like Pedro de Leon actually wrote about these ruins. Now, he didn't mention that they were gates of the gods, but they are brought up in the book. He did go to Tiwanaku, and it's called something else in Spanish. It's the same thing, but he calls it something different. It's an interesting point out that he had this book. We're talking about portals. We see different portals. It'd be maybe worth looking into. Okay, but no more portal talk. I do have a fun fact to bring up, though, just for everyone out there that didn't see the post that I had made on Reddit on the YouTube channel. In, I believe, episode 4, the first Saturday that Apollo's left on his couch and his mom goes to work, on the TV you see he's watching a cartoon. The cartoon is called The Snowman. It's from 1932, and it's a cartoon about the Eskimo and his little animal friends creating the snowman with some sort of dance, ritualistic dance. It becomes alive. It's evil. It's mean. It tries to, smash the town. And at the end, the Eskimo is able to turn the heat up and the sun melts and kills the snowman. which I thought was an interesting piece of information that maybe someone wants to run with, but it has a little bit of an element to this show with the Apollo, the sun god, and, bringing monsters to life that might, not go exactly how we want them to go. But I think you have a question for me, Rob, or for everyone, really.
Yeah, and I actually think it's more for everybody out there listening because, Chris, you and I can't come to a good answer on this. We notice that William, after he's been just brutalized by Cal, his body gets dragged off. So, our question of the week for everybody is, why does the monster drag kindergarten William Wheeler drag his body off? What does he want with the body? What's the reasoning for that?
Well, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it and you want to support the channel, please like, subscribe, and share. And if you're already doing those things, both Rob and I genuinely thank you. Until next episode, stay curious out there.